My name is Antonio, and in this particular episode of our mathematics course in Global Education Zone, we'll be talking about statistics. So what statistics? Statistics is basically, simply and fundamentally known as the general word that is used for the presentation, for the study and the interpretation of information. So when you study and interpret information, it's called statistics. And statistics is also simply known as it's just like a simple way of analyzing data, and those data are often in terms of numbers, figures and shapes. Now there are different things that are used, there are different tools that are used when we want to carry out a statistical analysis. Now ignore the big grammar and simply just understand that statistics has some different things that we use when we want to do it. Now these things that we use, or we can call them tools, they are like your bar charts, your pie charts, your histogram, your line graphs, your so on and so forth, your picture diagram, which is also known as your pictogram. Then you have your histogram too. Now these structures, or basically these diagrams that are used when we want to carry out statistics, we'll be talking about them today, and let's move on. But before that, let's talk about one basic element of statistics that many of these tools have in common, and this basic element is called your frequency table. Now a frequency table is basically an organization of the data in your table. So for example, when we assume we have a data of if we have the number of students in different classes, then we have in one class we have 10 students, in the second we have 5, in the third we have 3, in the fourth we have 2, in the fifth we have 3, in the sixth we have 7, in the eighth we have 8, we have 9, we have 11, 13, 14, 17. Oh sorry, let me just keep this from 0 to 10. So we have 4, 5, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6, 7. Let's remove 6 out of this. 8. Now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, now we have 10 data. We have 10 different classes, and these are the students in these classes. So let's construct a histogram. A histogram is basically a table that involves the number of students and the frequency. So that's what is known as a frequency table. And this frequency table is constructed like this. We will take each of the numbers. So from here we have numbers from 1 to 10. I specially designed it to include numbers from 1 to 10. So let's call this the number of students number. And then beside that we have the frequency. Now let's have the numbers 1 to 10. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now for the number 1, the frequency of a number is basically the number of times that number appears on the histogram. So for example, in this table, number 1 appears how many times? 1, 2. Number 1 appears 2 times. Then number 2 appears how many times? 1, 2, 3. Number 2 appears 3 times. Number 3 appears how many times? 1, 2, 2 times. Number 3 appears 2 times. Number 4 appears 1, 2, just 2 times twice. Number 5 appears 1, 2, 3 times. Number 6 appears number 6 doesn't appear. So the frequency of number 6, if a number doesn't appear, it will have a frequency of 0. So number 6 has a frequency of 0. Number 7 has a frequency of 1, 2, 3. Number 8 has a frequency of 1, 2, of 2. Number 9 has a frequency of 1, 2, of 2. Number 10 has a frequency of 1, of 1. So this is how to construct a frequency table. And this frequency table contains all our data. And each of these numbers, you can see that they have their corresponding frequency. When we add together the frequency, we'll get the total number of data. So that means if there are 20 data, when we add the frequencies, they will give us 20. So that is how you construct a frequency table. Just have your numbers or your elements, and then your frequency, the number of times your elements occur in your data. That is basically the fundamentals of statistics. Now moving on, let's talk about the definition of each of these tools used in statistics. The first one we're talking about is your bar chart and your pie chart. What's a bar chart? A bar chart is basically a diagram that consists of rectangles, and these rectangles, they are upright and they have spaces within them. They have spaces between them, and those spaces are equal. For example, if you have a first rectangle, the space between the first rectangle and the second rectangle will be equal to the space between the second and the third, and so on and so forth. So that space is constant. And then after that, we have the width. So, or rather, we have the height. The height of the rectangles represents or is proportional to the magnitude of the data. For example, the data having the highest frequency, we have the highest height of rectangle, and so on and so forth. So that's how a bar chart works. Then we also have the pie chart. Your pie chart is basically a circle, and then that circle is divided into sectors. And those sectors, each of those sectors represents the magnitude of the data by the angle. So the angle you choose for the sectors represent the magnitude of the data. So we'll be doing calculations on that in a later section of this video, but this is just an introduction to statistics. Then after pie chart, which other tool do we use for analyzing? So we also make use of pictograms. Pictograms are basically picture charts. So when you make use of pictograms, pictogram is when you use pictures to represent your data on a table. Then we also have your histogram. So your histogram is a number of rectangles, just like your bar chart. But in this case, your histogram, in your rectangles, there's no space between them. So your rectangles are drawn side by side with no spaces between them, but still the height is proportional to the magnitude of the data. And histograms, they are very useful in calculating whenever you want to make use of a graphical method of looking for the mode. That is the magnitude, that's the data with the highest frequency. When you're looking for the mode, histograms are useful. And even whenever you want to have a relative comparison or relative analysis of the data, when you want to compare each of the data with each other so as to know how they appear, so that is where you use a histogram. Then we also have the frequency polygon. A frequency polygon is basically something that whenever you draw a histogram, you can get a frequency polygon from a histogram. So the tops of the rectangles and the midpoints of those tops, you are going to join them together of each of the rectangles that make up a histogram. So don't worry if you don't understand what I'm saying right now, but in the subsequent videos we'll do the practical of this topic. Then moving on, we also have frequency polygon. Yes, after frequency polygon, a frequency polygon looks like a line diagram. So it's basically a group of lines, but those lines, they are the lines that join the midpoint of your rectangles, and those rectangles represent your data. So now, good, so far so good, we have covered that. So now let's talk about one last thing about this video. And the last thing we're talking about here is group data. So most of the time, when you have a data that has a wide range, or a data that has an expansive range, and you don't want to be talking about them singly, you can group them together. For example, in this data here, where I have numbers 1 to 10, I can take them in twos. So let's say from 1 to 2, from 2 to 4, from 4 to 6, from 6 to 8, from 8 to 10. Now there are some things we're talking about in group data. We also have so when you group data in that way, I will demonstrate it in a subsequent example. But when you group data, you have 4 parameters you talk about, 4 terms, and these are your class limits. Your class limit is the end values. For example, if I have a class of 1 to 2, my class limits are 1 and 2. That's the extremities. Then you also have your class boundaries. Your class boundaries are when you deduct and add 0.5 to your limit, you get your class boundaries. We also have your class intervals. Your class intervals, it is the difference between the upper and lower class boundary. Then lastly, we have your class midpoint or mid value, which is the average of the class limits. So thank you for watching this video, and hopefully in subsequent video we'll dive deeper into statistics. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to this channel so that you can encourage me and others who are doing this to continue supplying educational videos and make your learning easier. Thank you.